Hi, welcome to So What, a podcast where we talk to experts about one thing in their field that they think everyone should know about. I'm Madhurima.
And I'm Sean. And today we are talking with Dr. Lisa Brock, who I met when I began my career at Columbia College Chicago. Lisa was at that point chair of the Humanities, History, and Social Sciences department. And only after she left did I realize just how important of a career Lisa had. She's led a life as a radical intellectual and activist. She began fighting for girls' rights in middle school, Black studies in high school. She fought anti-police violence as an undergraduate and became known as a leader of the anti-apartheid movement while in graduate school here in Chicago. She was trained as an African historian at Northwestern University, where she received her PhD, and she has expanded her intellectual and solidarity work to include the African diaspora, especially Cuba and the U.S. She co-edited a groundbreaking work with Doctora Digna Castañeda Fuertes, the first Black professor emeritus at the University of Havana, Cuba, entitled Between Race and Empire, African Americans and Cubans Before the Cuban Revolution, and has published dozens of articles and essays on the African diaspora. She most recently published a monographic essay on Victor Dreke, a Black comandante of the Cuban Revolution who worked with Che in the Congo and Amilcar Cabral in Guinea-Bissau. She was founder of the Chicago Anti-apartheid collection at Columbia College Archives, and her most recent job as academic director of the Arcus Center for Social Justice and Leadership at Kalamazoo College. She retired in 2020, but when she began her career here in Chicago, she began it as an anti-apartheid activist, and today she's going to be speaking with us about something that we weren't that familiar with, but that seemed to become more and more important the more she told us about it. So welcome, Lisa. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the topic you want to discuss with us today and why you think it's so important?
Oh, okay, Sean and Madhurima. Thank you very much. Well, when I came to Chicago in 1980 to go to graduate school at Northwestern University, I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to just focus on graduate school. I'm not going to jump out here and become active very quickly because that's generally what I have done. And of course, then you end up trying to do both, which is never easy, but I was always compelled to do both. So I was, in 1980, I came in August, and then in, I think it was May or June of 1981, a very well-known exile from South Africa who had been in jail was teaching at Northwestern University. His name was Dennis Brutus. And so he took me to a meeting downtown, and the meeting was about stopping this rugby team from South Africa that I had never heard of, stopping them from coming to Chicago. And it was a big meeting, so I kind of entered a world that already existed of anti-apartheid activists in the city. So the team was called the Springboks, and the Springboks are like a gazelle animal in South Africa that leaps and jumps and runs, kind of looks like a big elk or deer. And so, I end up leaving the meeting as one of the co-chairs. I do not know how that happened. I still can't remember how it happened, but I remember a guy named Norm, white guy that worked at Laity Concern, and Ronell Mustin, who was with the National Anti-Imperialist Movement in solidarity with African liberation. I remember saying, can't you all do something with that name? But, and so the three of us ended up being co-chairs. And so we just got busy and started organizing against this team coming to Chicago.
So when you started, the visit from the rugby team was imminent. We knew that this was going to happen. Did you know when they were expected to be in Chicago?
They were expected to come to the U.S. in September.
Okay.
And so we started in June, so we didn't have much time.
Right.
But I should say that we understood it as a political move, not a sports engagement. There had been an international sports boycott already in existence, like a lot of other boycotts. in reference to South Africa. There was a cultural boycott, a sports boycott, and people were beginning to talk about an economic boycott. And so this was a part of that kind of armature of the fight against apartheid. I mean, the reason we knew it was not a sports engagement, but a political act, was because the Springboks were the best rugby team in the world. And they're coming to Chicago to play in 1981, to play local yokels. I mean, come on.
You're saying Chicago's not known for its fancy
It's
rugby team.
No, and neither was the entire United States.
Right.
So, so we started doing research, and one of the things we discovered was that a South African businessman had actually donated money to start rugby in the United States.
Huh.
So we were digging around, it was, and we were like, well, who are these rugby players? So we started doing research. Like, who are the local people that are going to play them? That was one of our things. And a second thing was try to stop them from coming to Chicago.
And what would you say is at stake in a boycott like this? Why go to that extent?
Yes. Because after all, I mean, it's just sports, right? It's
Sure.
just sports. Why spend all this time and energy making such a fuss about it? Well, because what you do is you raise people, you organize against it. And in that process, you are raising people's consciousness about what's happening in apartheid.
Right.
And you are also meeting different audiences. Like athletes are not necessarily the first ones to get involved politically. I mean, we know that historically, although Black athletes have been, and other athletes from the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, as you know,
Sure.
with Tommy Smith and John Carlos. So it has happened, but they lost their careers too. They never were able to run again. So anyway, so we're building audience by and raising consciousness with this boycott. One of the things that we should keep in mind is that the world, in many ways, was ahead of us in the United States in the anti-apartheid solidarity movement, and especially in the Commonwealth areas that now had all these former colonies in it. By 1981, the rugby team had already been kicked out, the soccer team had already been kicked out of FIFA.
Right.
The World Soccer Organization. And the rugby team had been kicked out of the Commonwealth Games, I believe. And so, the entire world was already on this about apartheid. And it makes sense because this was a colony founded both by the Dutch settlers, but ultimately British finance capital. And so people in Britain were particularly tied to what was happening in apartheid. And there had been a flow of exiles since the 60s, not just Black exiles, but exiles who were against apartheid, leaving the country rather than going to jail, or leaving the country after they got out of jail and moving to England.
And South Africa used to have, did it not, an exit visa? And so if you left South Africa, it was really hard, if not impossible, to. So when you use the word exile, you're not using it casually. These are literally people, whose departure from South Africa has like some degree of permanence to it.
Yes. You can't go back.
Right.
You can't go back. And some people had to sneak. Now, one of the interesting things is that white South Africans, especially of British origin, could easily get to Britain legally. Right. They could leave legally too. But Black South Africans could not.
They could not leave, or they could not get in other places, or both.
They could not leave well. I mean, they couldn't escape easily. So a lot of people would flee across borders and then catch a plane in Botswana or something like that. But also something had happened in 1963, which was the first organization of African unity, which is now the African Union. was founded after the majority of countries had become independent in Africa from colonialism. And one of the first acts they did is to condemn apartheid as a whole continent and to say that any African that crosses the border into any of our countries will be welcome.
That's very cool.
And the United Nations worked with them to get them UN passports.
That is very
So
cool.
the world was already moving in the direction of isolating South Africa.
Yeah, and it looks like the Olympic Committee had boycotted them starting just right after that, 1964. So
That's right.
this was almost 2 decades before this rugby tour. The world
right.
had already declared South Africa ineligible for the Olympic Games.
Right. And Namibia, South Africa illegally occupied Namibia because after World War I, Germany had colonized Namibia or Southwest Africa before World War I. But when Germany lost World War I, Britain and France divided up Germany's colonies.
Right.
Germany had Tanganyika, which became Tanzania, and I think they had Togo, and they had Southwest Africa. So France and Britain divided their colonies up, and then Britain gave Namibia in 1917 to white South Africa. So they had put apartheid in South Africa, in Namibia too. So in 1961, the United Nations had basically told South Africa to get out of Namibia, and they had continued to illegally, against the UN, to illegally occupy Namibia. So, yeah, it was a lot going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of it had to do with the fact that the UN changed. Think about it. After World War II,
Yeah.
it went from being, 5 or 6 dominant white countries
Right.
to all these countries of color around the world.
Yeah.
Right.
And they got busy. They got busy very quickly, saying we don't like apartheid.
Yeah.
The new Indian nation put forth a resolution in the UN to kick out South Africa, to ban South Africa. It didn't quite happen right then, but they were the first ones to bring it because they were the first nation to become independent after World War II.
Right.
In the 40s. It took Africans the 50s and the 60s. So back to the
Yeah. Sorry.
no, that's okay.
So it's in this context.
No, it's in this context. And you all have to keep in mind, I'm a historian. So, we, as my husband says, I know something that happened, 200 years ago more than I do yesterday. But
What happened yesterday was not interesting. I mean, I was here. Yesterday was not interesting, but
the dishes were put in the sink. I mean, Trump
right.
made another, foolish madman.
Well, I think that's part of what is important about this is actually that there are things that happened yesterday that continue to be interesting. We're having Trump talk about this claim that there's a genocide against the white South Africans, and that's why we need them to have refugee status and come to the United States. So this is it's ancient history, but it's live today.
It's outrageous. I mean, what he's saying to anybody that knows any history is that we're welcoming all the white supremacists that want to come here. You're welcome here because we are a white supremacist nation. I always have this belief that certain historical processes and actions and class struggles and ideas, even though they don't triumph at different times in history, they're still in history. They're still with us. They don't go away. They just didn't win in this era. And I think, what we're seeing now is a lot of, these ideas being promoted. And we have some people in the White House and people that supported white supremacy. And so it's back. It's back. Mm-hmm. I still don't think it's a majority. People agree with it. I think we have won some things in history ideologically, but you can have a vicious minority create havoc like apartheid.
Yeah,
I was going to say, South Africa seems like a key example here.
And the only way it happens, it doesn't happen ideologically, it happens through violence.
Yeah.
It happens through violence. So back to Springboks.
Yeah.
So, and this is something that I think people who, understand how organizing might work today with signal threads and blue sky and social media, but you didn't have any of that to organize this boycott. So
No.
Can you say a little bit about basically just how did this work? How did you get the word out? How did you organize people? How did you get access to sort of the public sphere in this environment?
Well, first of all, times were different in many ways, not just social media. So one of the things we did is we had a press conference. People had press conferences. We had a press conference to announce that we existed. The Stop the Apartheid Rugby Tour exists. Our goals are A, B, and C. Main goal was to stop them from coming to Chicago. And the press came and they covered us. And that's what's different too. We had a more independent press than we have now. That's something that's changed. We had a more independent press. We had some press people who were with us who had read enough about apartheid. We also, at various times when an ANC member would come to Chicago, we would take them to meet with the editorial boards of the Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune so that the editorial boards could hear their view, So at that time, we didn't have social media, but we did have a more independent press. Now, keep in mind, the era that we're in now really started with Reagan, the kind of monopolization of a lot of things began to happen. And now we're 50, 60 years later, and we're seeing, but it had not begun total at that time. We did have an independent press. People didn't get fired for writing things that were controversial. And also South Africa was already, as I said, in the world was becoming a sort of pariah state. It didn't take a rocket scientist to know that what was happening in South Africa, where you have a small minority of whites who control absolutely everything from the political, the economic, and then the brutality. We also had a visual media of reporters and who were on the ground in South Africa who would sneak in and get images. And keep in mind, 1976 was the Soweto uprising. And there was a lot of leaked images from them shooting kids in the back. And Americans at that time still cared about that and thought that was not the right thing to do. So press conferences were our major weapon to get the word out.
Like that kind of network, right? Was how you found out where the rugby team was actually going to play.
Because we would ask people. It was September 6th, literally, when they landed. They spent 2 weeks in Chicago. It was a good time to protest. They spent 2 weeks because they were trying to figure out where to play. September 6th, they came and we heard they were staying at the Chicago Athletic Association on North Michigan Avenue. So we began immediately to protest there. That same day, that newspaper article that threatened me personally came out.
This is in the Sun-Times, letter to the editor.
Letter to the editor. And, said if Lisa Brock and her group thinks they can stop our boys from South Africa, they will not be met with impunity. Rugby players and their fans are a violent lot, So that morning, my neighbor saw it first, came over to me and tells me that this is in the paper. She shows it to me. She gets me all worked up. I put a knife in my bag because she's sure the Nazis are after me in Chicago. Because we looked up this guy that wrote it, and we pretty much saw that he was connected to the local Nazi organization, or not local, somewhere in Indiana or somewhere, Michigan, I don't know, but somewhere close.
When you say knife, though, Lisa, you need to be specific here. This is not a small knife.
No, I wish I'd had a Swiss knife at the time, but I didn't. Only knife I had was a big kitchen knife.
Sure.
So she convinces me to put that in my bag. But meanwhile, that night as well, so I had gotten a call like at 6 a.m. telling me the guys were coming, right? And then this article comes out, and I put the knife in the bag. But I had also gotten a call from somebody telling me that one of our people was in jail at 11th and State, that history there. And there was two guys that were putting up posters on the L, because that's the other way we got things out. We put posters up. So there was a black guy and a white guy from our group out there putting up flyers or posters on the L, and the cops see them, the CTA cops see them and tell them to stop. Well, the black guy runs. He runs.
He knows what's up.
Yeah.
And poor Steve fires Steve. He's like, oh. So he puts his hands up and stops. So I get a call that morning, I think from the black guy, whose name I cannot remember, that Steve was in jail at 11th and State. And then the team was coming. So I had like a bag, I don't know, it was a huge bag. And I've got rolled up posters in it. I've got my knife. I've got my wallet to go to the bank to get some money to get Steve out of jail. But I have rolled up posters because the city council was meeting that day to ban the team. And the team is also arriving. The vote was at 10 a.m. at City Hall. So I'm leaving the house at like 8, right? I get down to 11th and State. They claim they have to investigate Steve. They won't take bail money or anything. I have to come back later. Okay. I had gone to the bank, gone to the jail. I leave the jail with all my stuff and I go to City Hall because I want to tell people there the team is here. So who we had all planned to be there at
City Hall.
At City Hall. And Danny Davis was the one who's now a congressman who's finally retiring, but he was an alderman at the time, and he was introducing the bill to ban the team from Chicago. So Jesse Jackson came. I remember seeing him. So we were all kind of, going in there, and I had these posters because what I wanted to do is I wanted to give the posters out and for us all to march from City Hall over to the Chicago Athletic Association.
That would have been good.
Yeah, greet the team. Well, they did it, but I just wasn't a part of it because I forgot my knife was in my bag. And when I go through security at the City Hall, the metal detector, they pick up the knife. So I got arrested, handcuffed and arrested. And
this is the same day. This is the same day that your colleague's been arrested. This is the same day that the team has arrived. This is the same day that you're going to march from City Hall to the Chicago Athletic Association.
Yeah.
And you, as one of the co-chairs of...
At the Stop the Apartheid Rugby Tour. That's what it was called.
Stop the Apartheid Rugby Tour... are getting arrested. That just makes complete sense.
For having a kitchen knife in your bag.
Yes. For having a kitchen knife.
That you're trying to take into City Hall. Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
How did the vote go?
So the vote went in our favor. So the team was banned from Chicago to play anywhere in Chicago on any public lands. And, the only place they could really play in Chicago would be a public park. There was no private parks. So we knew at that time that they were going to have to try to go somewhere. So we're trying to find out where they're playing. So we put out a notice in the paper, a press conference, saying anybody in the close suburbs around Chicago, anybody who sees funny people putting funny lines on any of your community parks, please call us and let us know. And people did call us. I remember this lady from Libertyville who was a teacher. So it was all kinds of people who knew enough about apartheid to want to be on our side, and then they would respond, we don't know why they're doing this. We just want to play a game. This is just about sport, and they're politicizing sport and blah, blah, blah. And then,
they just want to come play with the world champion Chicago world champion Chicago rugby team that obviously doesn't even have like a home field,
No,
so.
no. And in
Right.
fact, they didn't even have enough Chicago locals, I think, so because they wanted a better team. So this was actually regional. They had constructed a regional team. So then we're trying to figure out where is the game going to be and when. And we're literally sitting in the office the night before the big event and like upset, that we don't know where it is. We didn't, they're going to play this damn thing because we wanted to. We had kicked them out of Chicago, but where are they playing?
Right.
We get a call in our office. I mean, we were there almost all night because we had told people to call us if they had any information in one of our press releases. And so a guy calls us, and he's a white guy from Milwaukee who plays rugby. And he said he had been asked to be on the local team to play the Springboks,
Wow.
but that he refused because he was against apartheid. But some of his friends decided to play. So he said they did not know where the game was. This is the night before. He said, but the plan was that everybody connected, the inner circle, all the players and the managers and the supporters were going to meet at a Howard Johnson's on I-94 at the border between Illinois and Wisconsin. So he said, I tell you what, I'll go. I'll go for you. And I'll call you as soon as I know.
Wow.
So we were like, yay, yay. So he called me in the morning at 6:30 and told me where it was. It was in Racine, Wisconsin, in a public park. And he was on his way there. Now, we had arranged for a bus to take us to wherever the game was, but the bus wasn't leaving until 9 a.m. So here I am wanting to get there right away. But as a leader of this movement, I had to wait for the bus. I couldn't abandon the people who were coming for the bus. But we did send people up, lawyers especially. We sent people up in a car. Racine's about 2 hours away. So we get there at about 11 o'clock in the morning. When we get there, the game's over. The game's over. They had played a shortened version of the game. And let me tell you why. Because this park is in a black neighborhood. But what happened is the game was shortened because of all our press releases in the Sun-Times. And people in Racine read the Sun-Times. They realized what was going on. They see all these white people out in their park playing some funny game.
Right.
They jump up and run onto the park.
Oh, wow.
And stop it. They get arrested, though. They get arrested. And when we get there, a lot of them are in jail. If I remember correctly, even the head of the school board was in jail. So we go over to the jail and we use our money because we were prepared to get engaged in civil disobedience by this time. We helped them get out, and it actually started a Racine Anti-apartheid organization and movement.
That's so interesting.
Which is what you had intended in a lot of ways, right? This was part of the goal.
That's right.
You have people start by boycotting the sports team and then radicalize them into being anti-apartheid in general.
That's right. That's right. And all these other people, like the little lady from Libertyville. I mean, because when we would do our press conferences, we would put data in there. It wasn't just we don't like them. We would, the land, 13% of the population owns 87% of the land. Africans have been pushed off. Everybody's a migrant worker. They can't live with their families. I mean, the data was a lot. It was enough to convince people something's wrong here. Yeah.
The rationale against apartheid is very, very strong.
It's very strong. So
this whole story is just so fascinating and so interesting. I mean, you have your clear victories, which is getting the rugby team kicked out of Chicago. So that's an entire city where they are boycotted. They just can't play, and maybe they get to play in Roosevelt Park in Racine. But the reason that they get stopped is, I mean, it's of course the work of organizing, but literally you're not there yet. You know, the work that you've done has been, as Sean pointed out, in the raising of consciousness, in the putting the facts before people, you know, being persistent in that messaging so that, you know, the people whose backyard it is are there to stop it. And this is 1981. The first elections are in
1994.
And of course, you know, ANC wins in a
handily.
You know, that's still 13 years. So that's still 13 years of active anti-apartheid work.
Right.
And I'm just kind of wondering if you can sort of frame the rugby boycott in kind of the legacy or in the
international context.
Yeah.
This was just one drop. This was just one drop of fierce activism all over the world and all over this country. And I think, the turning point, there were a few turning points in South African history. So this wasn't new to people who were looking. I mean, you know, the Council on African Affairs that was led by Paul Robeson, of all people, and W.B. Du Bois in the 30s and 40s led the first bank boycott in Harlem and raised money for South Africans. And when you look at their records, when you look at their budget, they're sending $2,000 to the ANC, you know, or when they collected. So this wasn't new. So I think what happened is it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people knew and knew and knew because people kept fighting. Right. Even in the era of anti-communism, because of course Mandela was seen as a communist by the U.S. The other thing I think is important to understand is that, you know, when Mandela went to jail in 1963, all of the other people soon after, especially Oliver Tambo, who was his partner and leader in the ANC, left the country in exile, not to immigrate, but to raise struggle everywhere. So wherever they landed, there was going to be an ANC cohort, cadre. So whether it was in African countries, Dar es Salaam, Lusaka, Lagos, Algeria, wherever it was, wherever there was an ANC person, there was going to be a movement. That was their goal. And so it spread intentionally. You know what I'm saying? So, and they were everywhere. Because the other thing that happened was a lot of universities, you know, universities, as we know, tend to be places where people have read a little bit and know a little bit.
True anyway.
Yeah, there were a lot of brave people, both in the country and outside of the country, from South Africa. And so from 1976 up until 1990, the movement in South Africa never stopped.
Right.
It never stopped. And so what we did in 1981 was not the beginning, but it was kind of a beginning in some ways in the U.S., in the Midwest, you know, but it was the result of what had begun to happen with all these other things going on. The sports boycott. Also, the United Nations gave the ANC and the PLO offices.
Right.
And we were in touch with them all the time. So they are sending us press releases and notices of what's going on in South Africa. This is what I think people need to understand, is that these are long struggles. They're not short struggles. Don't give up if the first thing doesn't work. I mean, ANC started doing general strikes in the 1950s. Yeah. But in the 1980s, they had a majority of the people going out.
So if we were going to talk about the lessons that you take from this, it seems like one of the main ones is that it's not about the next election cycle. It's not about, what are we going to do next month? It's that it's going to take a while.
Yeah. And you fight to win, but you don't have to win right now. I think because the issue is they've got the power, the money, the guns, and and it's sacrifice. I mean, when I look at a lot of people, I mean, a lot of heroes that we have as heroes, you know, people who have put their lives on the line for this movement, been in jail for 28 years. Their families suffer. They suffer. But people have to fight. If you don't fight, there's no justice. We can't just let them win. You know, you have to fight. And so I think the lessons are you have to be prepared to fight over time. There's always new young people who are coming along with their own talents and skills and new technologies that they can put towards it. But they have to also understand, and this is one of the things I take from the Mamdani campaign, that door knocking, the kind of one-on-one conversations with people, it still means a lot.
Right.
You can mobilize a lot of people to come to a demonstration online, but you can't really convince them to go deeper than that without some ongoing consciousness raising and engagement. And so that's one lesson. Long-term personal engagement with new tools. There's still that old tool of talking to people to raise consciousness, and having study groups. I mean, we used to have study groups, believe it or not. With everybody was in them, not just academics and students, but people from the labor network. You know, that's one thing I didn't say is that Chicago had a lot of different organizations that focused on different constituencies. So we had a labor network. They worked with UAW people to basically refuse to support making cars in South Africa. Polaroid, there was an early Polaroid campaign in 70 because the Black Polaroid workers in Rochester, New York, realized that Polaroid was making the passes for Black South Africans, the photos.
These are the passes that Black South Africans needed in order to be in white parts of South African cities, employment passes or just to prove that they had the right to be in these spaces.
Places, that's right. Yeah. So I think the lessons are keep fighting, longevity. I think the lesson is building consciousness over time. Organize. That's the lesson. That's the and everywhere. So UAW protested, right? Polaroid workers protested. AFSCME protested. We managed in Illinois to get the state pension funds divested from South Africa.
Wow.
So people were working on that level, working through state. You work everywhere you can. And you call on people wherever they are and say, this thing is wrong. Can we work with you to do something? I spoke to unions down in Springfield. So we went everywhere to speak. And of course we had lobbying, we would lobby Congress, take over during the day. We've got these crazy people in charge right now. So it looks very difficult, but don't give up hope, because I was on John Calloway's show 2 weeks before Mandela was released and had no idea it was in the works. No idea. And then when Mandela got out, we were super ecstatic and we were talking. We had parties at 3 a.m. because that was the time he was supposed to be released. And everybody was up. We were cooking. I was frying potatoes. We had CNN on the television, and we were crying. We were calling people all over the world. People were calling us because I had met a lot of people abroad, and it was a moment. It was a moment. And the news was at some of the parties. They weren't at my house, but they were at some of the parties. So, yeah.
I mean, obviously, we've been talking about so many things, your expertise at which we can just see and hear. So if there was something that you are not at all an expert in that you would love to think about or talk about, or you think Sean and I should actually think about ourselves and maybe get an expert in that field to come talk to us, what do you think that might be?
I like true crime podcast.
Oh,
Nice.
all right.
Maybe that's what we should do.
And I have a character in my head after all these years, especially in academia. There's so many people in academia I wanted to actually sucker punch. Usually some supervisors, some racists, some patriarchs, some full of themselves, somebody. There's always, every place I've been, there's somebody like that. And usually more than one. And of course, you can never do it. So I have an alter ego that I'm trying to find, maybe my grandson, who is he's a good artist and comic book maker. I have a character that I want to fight for justice. And I want her to be my age, not a kid.
Okay.
I want her to be my age, and but she has superpowers.
Okay.
I want to have a cape.
Yeah.
And some kind of outfit.
Sure.
But it'll be called the Vengeful Bitch for Justice.
Okay.
That's what I want to be.
That's awesome. We should make that happen.
Fans can help make this a reality. We'll have to come back and get a color scheme, for the cape and everything.
And then my friend Tracy said we have to come up with where you got your superpowers from. What is the backstory?
What is the origin story?
The story. That's right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us your time. It's been really important to hear, not just about the anti-apartheid movement generally, but also the local things that you've done. You said at one point that it was a drop in the bucket, but I do think that all of those drops were needed. So thank you.
They were. That's what's going to be needed to topple this latest horror.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm Madhurima, and you can find more about my work at madhurimachakravarti.net.
And I'm Sean. You can find my writing at breakingculture.substack.com. The music for the show was composed for us by Chris Stokes. You've been listening to the podcast, So What?